How about now? There you go. Yep.
Test. There we go. Yeah. Yeah, I'll start from the top. Yeah. Good evening, everyone. My name is Eusebio Ortega, and I'm the Associate Technical Assistance Program Manager at the California Coalition for Rural Housing. Clancy and I will be both presenting today on behalf of the team of consultants working on the Fresno County Multi-Jurisdictional Housing Element Update. So here we have the agenda for today's meeting. During today's meeting, we'll introduce you the project team working on this cycle of the housing element. We'll also give an overview of the housing element process, as well as an overview of the regional housing needs allocation process, also known as RHNA for short. And then lastly, we'll be providing some housing element background data that's important to consider for this update of the housing element. And lastly, of course, the main focus of today's discussion is to save plenty of time at the end of today's discussion to learn from you, all residents here of Coalinga, about the housing needs here in your community. So here on this slide, we have the project team listed. Along with the jurisdictions listed on the slide, the city of Coalinga has opted into a regional multi-jurisdictional effort. We actually have workshops planned for each of these communities, and we have flyers here available at the welcome table if you're interested in learning more about the other workshops going around in the region. The project team is working closely with city staff on the housing element update. We're actually working with the Fresno Council of Governments, which is the acting lead agency who will be coordinating each of the workshops with each jurisdiction. Now I can go ahead and introduce you to the project team. First, we have Christine Kai, who is Deputy Director of the Fresno Council of Governments, and will be facilitating meetings with the participating jurisdictions throughout the process. And then following Christine, we have the consultant team. We have Cynthia Walsh from PlaceWorks, who is the assigned project manager for the city of Coalinga. And we have also the California Coalition for Rural Housing, of course, who will be helping with the outreach portion of the housing element update. So here we have the objective for today's meeting. Over the next slides, I'll be providing an overview of the housing element update process. I'll also be sharing information about some of the housing needs that we identified. But really the main focus of today's discussion is to give residents the opportunity to ask questions about the process and provide their initial input on potential housing issues and opportunities here in Coalinga. So now we'll go ahead and get started with an overview of the housing element. So first, what is the housing element? So the housing element is one of the 8 mandated elements of the general plan, and the housing element must be updated once every 8 years. This cycle of the housing element update consists of December of 2023 all the way to December of 2031. The previous cycle, which was the 5th cycle, consisted of December of 2015 all the way through December of 2023. Lastly, the housing element is a plan for accommodating the jurisdiction's fair share of the regional housing needs allocation. And we'll dive into that further as we move along the presentation here. So now we can go ahead and get jumped into the housing element and what it's about, of course. So per state housing law, the housing element must plan for housing needs of all economic segments of the community. The housing element must also provide adequate zoning to meet the housing needs of the community. And it also must include goals and policies to ensure that each jurisdiction provides adequate housing support for the entire community, including special needs households, such as large families, people with disabilities, people at risk of homelessness, seniors, etc. Now, what the housing element does not require is that it does not require the city to or county to build the units. It does not require them to provide funding to build the units, and it does not require them to approve specific residential developments or projects. So in other words, the way I like to describe the housing element is that it helps each city understand how many housing units they need to be able to accommodate in order to meet their community/population needs. So now we'll be going over what's included in the housing element. Here we have listed the regional section of the housing element, which includes the introduction of the housing element process, which covers the purpose and scope of the housing element. Then we have the county-wide background report, which includes an analysis of demographics, housing characteristics, and analysis of the potential market here, and also an analysis. Sorry, my words are getting mixed up. Of governmental and environmental constraints in the region. Then we have the county-wide analysis of fair housing, which includes a regional approach to addressing fair housing requirements here in the region. And then the fourth section is the county-wide housing goals and policies, which actually includes the regional goals and policies that are going to help meet the housing needs here in the region. And lastly, we have a summary of sites inventory, which includes a summary of the land and resources that are available to help meet the housing needs here in Coalinga and in Fresno County. So now we'll be jumping into the local section, which includes more jurisdiction specific details of the housing element. In the first section, we have the local housing needs assessment, which is a analysis of the at-risk units here in the region, as well as the preservation options for those units. Then we have the local fair housing assessment, which looks to address specific fair housing issues in each community. And then there's the local sites inventory and analysis of resources, which actually describes the sites that are available to meet the RHNA allocation. Then we have the local housing constraints analysis, which actually identifies potential governmental constraints to the development and preservation of housing. And lastly, we have the evaluation of the previous housing element, which actually describes the progress that has been made since the previous housing element update. So now we'll be jumping into the project timeline of the housing element. Here is, in this slide, we have a flow of the housing element update process. The project timeline was developed with the end goal of adoption hearings being held by December of 2023. But in the meantime, we have started outreach efforts actually in July and September of this year, and are actually wrapping up our outreach efforts this month. So after that is complete, we'll be preparing an admin draft of the housing element, which is expected to be completed by January of 2023. After that, we have the public review of the housing element, which typically takes around 30 to 40 days, and that's scheduled to be completed in February 2023. And then after the public review is completed, we have a second round of outreach where we go out and do another round of workshops and webinars for the community and to get more feedback from key stakeholders in the region. After that second round of outreach is completed, we then submit our first review to HCD for the housing element, and that is expected to occur between April and June of 2023. And then after that review is completed, it gets resubmitted to HCD for a second review, and that typically is a shorter process of only 60 days, and that usually is completed towards the end of September of 2023. So yeah, with that said, that concludes my part of the presentation. I will go ahead and pass it to my colleague, Clancy, who will be covering the rest of today's presentation. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you, Eusebio. So I'm getting into the more fun data points of this. So we're going to be talking a little bit about our regional housing needs allocation here first. So how did we magically come up with a number of units that Coalinga needs for this cycle? So first, the state says the state of California needs 2.5 million units of housing. And then it goes to the regional level. So here we're part of the Fresno COG. There's different throughout the state, but here in the Fresno COG area, which is just the county of Fresno, our RHNA is 58,298. So that the state, 2.5 million, the region, we have to get 58,000. And then what the regional COG does is it takes that 58,000 number, looks at current population, future population, and then also kind of capacity needs of a city. And so then it's passed down, and the city must find ways to accommodate that housing at different densities for different types of units. So what is this magical number that Coalinga needs? Right now, it is 566 for that next cycle, representing about 1% of the county's allocation. So it's 566 units. It is broken down for your different income brackets, and we have that number in the back. And this number has not changed much since that fifth cycle, but that is what it is for this next round, 566. And background data. So what is some of the stuff that was used to help come up with that RHNA and help us understand where Coalinga is at housing-wise? So we first start with income, because you typically got to have some money to be able to spend some money on some housing. So the state defines this, and while there is a good bit of income variation throughout the county, it is the number we're using for those metrics. So the area median income for a family of 4 in Fresno County is $80,300. And then you can see on that chart that median is bolded, and then above that you have low, very low, extremely low, and then below that you have moderate. So the 80,000 number is what we're talking about when we're saying area median income, and then when we're talking moderate and above, we're talking about 96,000, so about 15,000 more than that. And so furthermore, who is considered low income when we're talking about special needs housing, when we're talking about these types of things? So here in Fresno County, for a family of 4, low income is $62,000, $62,300 per year, and that is considered low income. And within the whole county, about 43% of households fall into that lower income category of 62,000 or below. So who makes up that? What members of our community are we talking about here? So low income, you might find your school social workers, your mail carriers, your graphic designers. Very low, who might you see in that? Folks like your personal health care aides, the medical transport folks, your veterinary assistants. And then that extremely low, which represents 30% of your area median income, tends to represent part-time employees or folks on a fixed income of some sort. So, low-income households, we said earlier 43% of the households in the county are low income. What is that in Coalinga? It is 38% of the households fall into that category, and it's pretty evenly split amongst the 3 extremely low, very low, and low. So 38% of your Coalinga households fall into our lower income category. And then furthermore, how affordable is Fresno County? Now that we've talked a little bit about income, what are housing prices looking like? So these numbers are taken from Zillow and the California Home Sale Activity, and these are from May 2022, so I know there has been a little variation. But what we're looking at, so median home cost back in May of 2022 was $290,000 here in Coalinga for new home sales. And then back in 2021, it was $225,000. So you've even, in that 1 year time, there was a 28.9% increase in home costs here in Coalinga. So just kind of putting that frame of reference, if someone's making $62,000 per year, affording a $300,000 home, the money, it may not be working out. So this is why we're talking about things like affordability with this housing element, because there's a lot of prices going up and not a lot of incomes doing the same. And furthermore, who is affected by these high prices? So one unit of measure we do that is called housing cost burden. So we consider it overpaying if you're paying 30% or more of your income on housing. And then there's another category of severely overpaying, which is paying more than 50% of your income on housing. So what do those numbers look like in Coalinga right now? About 26% is overpaying for their housing, and then about 12% is severely overpaying, meaning that 50% or more. And I will say these are based on 2018 data, so again, could be some variations, but about a quarter of the people in Coalinga are currently spending 30% or more of their income just on housing. And then housing types in Coalinga, what does that look like? Because there is variation throughout the county. And so here in Coalinga, about 66% of units are single family homes. And then 25% are multifamily, between anywhere from 2 to plus units. And then 11% is mobile homes. And we wanted to point that out because there is a bit of a larger mobile home percentage here in Coalinga than other parts of the county, just representing the diversity in different types of housing available throughout. And then another figure, population with a disability. As y'all know, with Coalinga and the state hospital and the way it's positioned, there could be some higher numbers with this, but 14% of the population of Coalinga is estimated to have a disability, and that can be anything from an ambulatory, so difficulties walking, to sight, to developmental delays. So it's just another number to consider when we're thinking, who are we talking about when we're talking affordable housing and their needs? All right, so that was some really fun and just not at all boring data. But now we're gonna get into the discussion. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions before I break into that?
On the breakout of the demographics, I know that the state hospital and the prison are counted in our subvention in terms of our population.
Mm-hmm.
How is that information? I mean, is it just raw data then that goes into these breakdowns? Or is it analyzed and massaged because obviously they've already got housing?
Yeah, so most of these numbers, they're derived from the American Community Survey or CHAS data, which is another federal source of data. And those don't include what they call institutionalized populations, which are those two groups. So those groups are not included in this data, but obviously there's influences and folks get released and are still here in Coalinga, but if they're currently institutionalized, they're not counted in these numbers.
Okay, so when we look, for example, at the disability, population with disability, those would be for example, the state hospital folks would not be included in that percentage, right?
That is correct. So this is Coalinga citizens, your potential voting population, your citizens of the city of Coalinga.
And do you have explanations behind the raw data, or is there just the data?
With these, it is just the data. It is taking from the community survey, it breaks it down by census tract, and then what they do is, accumulate the census tract data to come up with those numbers.
I mean, I'm just kind of wondering why we would have one of the highest percentages of population with disability here in Coalinga as opposed to Minnesota or something like that. We don't know, right? We just know that it is.
I want to ask a question, piggybacking on what you were saying and what you responded with. The state hospital has a large group of people who live there. Some of them are there because they're court ordered. Others actually have voting rights and vote in our elections. So the data that's there, is it in fact, because you had said it, the citizens, the ones who vote, does that cover some of those in there, which would then possibly elevate the disability?
Yeah, so I did speak with the voting thing. We don't need to start venturing into there, but census data comes from your census tracts, and census tracts and the census information is based off of who is living there as of this date. So this one is for the 2020. Yeah, so as the census works, if you're living in Coalinga as of August or April 1, 2020, you are counted in that census as a citizen of Coalinga. And yeah, when they're doing the numbers for, what is Coalinga looking like, it doesn't include your institutional data. So yeah, I did misspeak. And, things to consider influencing these numbers, things like seniors can, oftentimes you'll see if you have a greater elderly population, you might have a higher population with disabilities. And there's a lot of different factors to that, and it's not just one. I wouldn't say, be super concerned, but yeah, you'll oftentimes see maybe perhaps in older communities just higher because, harder to get around as you age. And with the disability numbers, it's not necessarily, it's not just, it's a wide range of things, and it's self-reported and based off of hospital numbers as well. So, it is anything from having a hearing aid perhaps to using a walker to, anything of the gambit that is considered a disability.
If I may add something, I just looked it up, and the median age for here is about 34. And then if you look at the median age for Fireball, it's 29. So it would seem that there are more older people here that would, make that median age rise. So that may be it.
If y'all ever want some demographic data, we'll find someone to help do. It's fascinating, and don't get me started on inaccuracies within the census. I'll be here all night. So, are there any other questions about the presentation? All right, yes. Yeah, so this refers to single-family detached homes. The size of structure. So, like something like a duplex or a triplex is going to be included in that multifamily. But yeah, single-family home, one family, designed for one family to be you living in it, detached home. Is there data as to how many folks are actually living in that? Yeah, we do have data on, like average number of occupants per home and overcrowding. And so we do have some slides on, or not on here, but we do have some on overcrowding, but we didn't include them because it wasn't an anomaly in the number. It was just very much average for the county in overcrowding. So we just did not include that. Typically with this, we like to just kind of highlight things that are, things to consider for the community, things like that, things that are, just kind of, a little bit of higher population of these folks here, so. But yeah, thankfully, not a huge overcrowding issue here in Coalinga as of now. So that's always good.
The housing element document will have a lot of that demographic data, correct?
Oh, it will have so much demographic data. You will get tired of looking at it, and then it'll give you more. And yeah, in that first draft, we will have that data available. So be looking out around January for that first draft to come out with everything. I mean, not just for Coalinga, but the whole county as well. Yeah, so, and then the current ADU production and JADU production, they're classified a little bit differently, but that also gets included with the RHNA numbers, and those units can be used to help satisfy the RHNA numbers. They will be, just depending on. It kind of gets ticky-tacky with when the date of construction starts, but those units are included. And then we also use the projection based off of how many units historically Coalinga has permitted year over year. So, moving on to our fun discussion. I'll go ahead and read through the questions for the folks on the stream, and then we can just kind of have an open discussion here in the room. Does that sound good? All right, so start thinking about what are the most critical housing issues here in Coalinga? And what do you think are the housing types most needed in the community? When assessing new housing development that may be built in the next 8 to 10 years, what should be the community's most important consideration. And then the last two questions are about soliciting more feedback from you all, and then anything else regarding housing opportunities here in the community or anything else y'all want to share. All right, we can get the stream off, we can talk. But yeah, all that really fun demographic stuff is